Britain's border security infrastructure is collapsing from the inside. December 2025. Not from external attack, not from equipment failure, but from over 41,000 migrants crossing the Channel this year. While the border force personnel tasked with responding to this crisis are stretched to breaking point, forced into strikes, and reporting morale that is really low as they struggle under unsustainable working conditions. An independent review of Border Force found the organisation appears to be struggling to get out of a cycle of crisis management, reacting to the last challenge and bracing itself for the next while performing at a suboptimal level. Although Border Force is largely delivering what is required of it on a day-to-day basis, it does so by stretching its resources in an unsustainable and highly inefficient way. This isn't a theoretical problem. November 14, 2025. 120 Border Force maritime workers who patrol British waters walked out on strike, potentially allowing opportunistic people smugglers free rein of the Channel crossing. The workers were protesting frozen allowances and changes to terms and conditions that remain unaddressed. PCS members voted overwhelmingly in favour of strike action by 96% from a turnout of 80%. While thousands of illegal migrants cross the busiest shipping lane in the world, the very people responsible for intercepting them are so fed up with their treatment that they're downing tools. But real quick, before we expose how Britain's border security is being destroyed from within, let's be honest. Mainstream media won't tell you about the staffing crisis, the strikes, or the systematic failures that have Border Force personnel warning the system is collapsing. That's why we built British Front Media to expose what they hide. Subscribe now for the truth about Britain's border breakdown. Reason number 1, Border Force staff are being pushed beyond breaking point, and morale has collapsed after years of crisis management without resolution. Morale among staff members was really low because all they talked about was pensions, money, and conditions. A union representative explained, "You can see how it affects them because all they want is something fair. You've got colleagues that work alongside that are earning different money, and their pension contributions are different, and they're doing exactly the same job. They're not happy." Think about that. Border Force personnel doing identical jobs, facing identical dangers, dealing with identical pressures, but being paid differently and receiving different pensions because they joined under different contract terms. 10 years on from Border Force's creation, some of the staff from the different precursor organisations maintain their previous terms and conditions. The workers protesting in November 2025 have been in dispute since April over frozen allowances and changes to terms and conditions that remain unaddressed, 6 years after the Home Office began a review. The representative said they don't want to strike because they believe in the job they're doing, but this is the only way to actually raise the profile and get this through. It really is appalling that a government organisation has taken this long. These aren't lazy public sector workers demanding more money for less work. These are personnel who patrol British waters, board vessels for inspection, and are on call to immediately respond to incidents such as small boat crossings. They also liaise with special forces on counter-terrorism, piracy, and narcotics operations. The PCS union describes the burden of their workers as dangerous, complex, demanding, and sometimes harrowing. August 31st to September 3rd, 2024, 650 Border Force staff at London Heathrow Airport were on strike, with PCS members in dispute since April over lack of flexibility from new rosters. A survey revealed that 79% of members said they felt pressured to work longer hours than they want to, 74% said they didn't feel supported through emotionally demanding work, and 84% said they had considered taking time off due to work-related stress and/or related mental health issues since April 2024, when the new roster was imposed. 84% considered taking time off for mental health issues. 3/4 feel unsupported through emotionally demanding work. Nearly 4 out of 5 feel pressured to work excessive hours. This is what happens when you ask people to manage an unprecedented border crisis with inadequate resources, incompatible IT systems, unclear priorities, and management that can't even standardise pay scales after 6 years of review. Reason number 2, an independent government review found Border Force is performing at a suboptimal level and trapped in a cycle of perpetual crisis management. July 2022, the UK government published an independent review of Border Force by Alexander Downer. The findings are devastating. Overall, his impression of Border Force was an organisation which is performing at a suboptimal level. It appears to be struggling to get out of a cycle of crisis management, reacting to the last challenge and bracing itself for the next, regardless of how predictable the next challenge may be. Although Border Force is largely delivering what is required of it on a day-to-day basis, it does so by stretching its resources in an unsustainable and highly inefficient way. Unsustainable and highly inefficient. That's the government's own assessment. Despite examples of excellence and a dedicated, capable workforce, Border Force seems to be less than the sum of its parts with significant systemic challenges. What does that mean in practice? In the latest survey of Border Force staff, the People Survey, Border Force continually scored below the Home Office average on questions regarding understanding their work objectives. This evidences a lack of clarity among staff, which in turn has impacted negatively on the morale of staff, as they need to pick up new tasks without a clear sense of how it applies to Border Force's wider priorities. Border Force personnel don't even understand what their objectives are. They're being told to do things without explanation of how it fits into strategy. This lack of clarity contributes to the confused identity of the organization. Border Force predominantly have an internal ethos as a law enforcement body and identify less strongly with the wider Home Office. It is the Home Office that views and portrays Border Force as an administrative and customer service body, similar to the way the Home Office sees itself. Think about that disconnect. Border Force sees itself as law enforcement. The Home Office treats them as customer service. Border Force wants to secure borders. The Home Office wants to facilitate travel. No wonder there is sometimes a disconnect between Border Force and its parent organization. Worse still, People Survey data shows that some Border Force officers feel that poor performance is not dealt with effectively, and bullying and harassment rates in the organization are higher than the Home Office average. Various forms of bullying and harassment were identified in the survey, but the highest number of reported incidents related to staff being made to feel incompetent, less valued, or excluded in some way. So Border Force personnel are underpaid, overworked, dealing with unprecedented migrant numbers, operating with incompatible IT systems, receiving unclear objectives, experiencing higher rates of bullying and harassment than the Home Office average, and feeling less valued. And people wonder why morale is really low. Reason number 3. Staffing shortages and inadequate workforce planning mean Border Force cannot properly respond to the migrant crisis, even when personnel want to. The 2022 independent review identified addressing staff shortages as one of several issues from a 2013 NAO report that remain relevant. 12 years. Staff shortages identified in 2013, still not resolved in 2025. Concerns regarding an inflexible resourcing model, which focuses on passenger queues, were also flagged back then and persist today. The review found that Border Force need to clearly establish and articulate their requirements, giving confidence to both ministers and the enabling teams, for example human resources, that they understand their business, have an appropriate grip, and are thinking long-term, rather than looking towards the next crisis. Translation: Border Force can't even tell the government how many staff they actually need. They're lurching from crisis to crisis without basic workforce planning. The service provided must be tailored to Border Force requirements. A vacancy in Border Force impacts directly on the customers standing in an immigration hall or waiting at the border for their goods to be checked, and also has a direct impact on the security of the UK. Every unfilled position is a security gap. Border Force staffing requirements and procurement needs must be delivered at pace, but they're not being delivered. December 2025. Border Force is redeploying maritime staff to processing centres, pulling people off patrol boats to deal with the backlog of arrivals, which means fewer vessels patrolling, which means more boats getting through, which means more arrivals, which means more processing needed. It's a death spiral. The Border Force Executive Committee should be focused on leading a refresh of the organisation with particular responsibility for recruitment, capabilities, planning and delivery of the border strategy 2025 to enable proper workforce planning, which should be more than a year in advance. Should be, but they're not, because they're too busy managing the next crisis. Reason number 4. Border Force is operating with incompatible IT systems and organizational structures left over from its 2012 formation that actively hinder effective operations. 10 years on from Border Force's creation, some of the staff from the different precursor organizations maintain their previous terms and conditions. There are different IT systems for customs and immigration, and organizational priorities are set independently by 2 different government departments. Different IT systems for customs and immigration in the same organization. Doing border control. That's like having your right hand and left hand using different languages. Border Force officers exercise their powers as either an immigration officer or officer of customs and excise in legislative terms, depending on what they're doing. The review found that various forms of bullying and harassment were identified, but there appears to be no set training for new managers, meaning that staff are required to learn management skills on the job. No management training, new managers thrown in the deep end. during an unprecedented border crisis, while dealing with staff on different pay scales, using incompatible IT systems, reporting to two different government departments. Border Force brand and its sense of cohesion is important for staff morale. Border Force should have a distinct identity and voice within the Home Office, which reflects its role as a uniformed force. But it doesn't, because the Home Office views them as customer service while they see themselves as law enforcement. The result? During the course of this review, plans to bring Border Force and immigration enforcement together under one Director General have been scrapped, and the two organisations will remain separate, though they will look for opportunities for closer alignment, more organisational chaos, more structural uncertainty, more confusion about who reports to whom and what the priorities are. Reason number 5, despite all these systemic failures, Border Force personnel are expected to handle record migrant arrivals while being told the system will somehow fix itself. 2025 has seen over 41,000 channel crossings. In 2025, the 10,000 mark of illegal migrants crossing the channel was reached before the end of April, more than a month earlier than the year before. 2025 looks to be heading for another record number. Who's dealing with these arrivals? Border Force personnel, the same people who are performing at a suboptimal level, stretched to breaking point, operating with incompatible IT systems, receiving unclear objectives, suffering from morale that is really low, and experiencing higher rates of bullying and harassment than the Home Office average. As people attempt to cross the channel, they are often escorted through French waters by French border patrol vessels before being intercepted by Border Force or RNLI vessels. It is common for the small boats to lack sufficient fuel to reach the UK, making rescue by other ships necessary. So Border Force isn't even stopping illegal crossings. They're providing maritime rescue services to people who deliberately put themselves in danger, knowing they'll be picked up and brought to Britain. Uncontrolled landings wherein a small boat makes it to the UK without being intercepted are rare due to increased observation efforts, but there is ample anecdotal evidence that some do. In one example, an illegal Albanian immigrant ran into a woman's house and demanded to use her phone. That's how porous Britain's borders are. People are landing undetected and running into civilian homes. Reason number 6. The political response has been to announce new laws and strategies while ignoring the fundamental reality that Border Force cannot execute any policy if the personnel are broken. The government announces new initiatives. The Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Act 2025 received royal assent, giving law enforcement stronger powers than ever before to intercept, detain and arrest people smugglers. New figures released showed nearly 900 organised immigration crime networks dismantled. In the past year, there has been a 33% surge in smuggling arrests, convictions and seizures of criminal cash and assets. Great, who's executing these powers? Border Force personnel who voted 96% in favour of strike action because they're so fed up with being treated like dirt. Who's dismantling smuggling networks? Personnel who don't understand their work objectives and whose morale is really low. Since a major incident was declared in late 2018, there have been repeated pledges and promises aimed at stopping the channel crossings. 7 years of pledges, 7 years of promises. Arrivals have gone from 297 in 2018 to over 41,000 in 2025, a 140-fold increase. In May 2025, the Labour government published a white paper, Restoring Control over the Immigration System. There is little mention of illegal immigration in the paper, which is primarily intended for legal migration. The situation continues to deteriorate, with no end in sight. Because you can't restore control with a broken enforcement mechanism. You can pass all the laws you want. You can announce all the strategies you want. You can sanction all the smugglers you want. None of it matters if the people actually responsible for securing the border are so demoralised, understaffed, underpaid and overworked that they're walking off the job. So here's where we stand in December 2025. Over 41,000 migrants crossed this year. Border Force is performing at a suboptimal level. Trapped in crisis management, stretching resources unsustainably. Staff morale is really low. 120 maritime workers went on strike. 650 Heathrow staff walked out. 84% considered taking time off for mental health issues. Different IT systems, different pay scales, no management training, unclear objectives, higher harassment rates, staff shortages unresolved since 2013. Inadequate workforce planning, maritime staff redeployed to processing centres, leaving fewer vessels patrolling. This is what happens when you ask people to manage an unprecedented crisis without giving them the tools, training, pay or support they need. This is what happens when you treat law enforcement personnel like customer service staff. This is what happens when you ignore systemic problems for over a decade while expecting the same broken organisation to somehow deliver different results. Britain's border security doesn't have a policy problem. It has a people problem. The personnel tasked with stopping illegal migration are themselves breaking under the pressure. And until the government addresses the fundamental staffing crisis, morale collapse, pay disparities, incompatible systems, and organisational dysfunction that plague border force, no amount of new legislation will stop the boats. The system isn't just strained. According to the people operating it every single day, the system is breaking, and when it finally snaps completely, Britain won't have a border at all.